Tra-la-la-lally, it smells like elves in the valley. Welcome to Biblioventures, The Hobbit, Episode 3, Chapters 3 and 4, A Short Rest and Overhill and Underhill, from the Rosenbach Museum, Library in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am Edward G. Pettit, and this is my co-host, Robert Berry. Hi, Rob.
Hey, how you doing, Ed?
I am awesome. I am so happy to get to talk about The Hobbit with you.
Yeah,
Um,
like we don't get enough of that in our normal
I
life.
know. So this will be fun. Are you drinking anything for this show, Rob?
First off, let me start by apologizing for whatever poor lighting or sound quality I have because we're at a friend's house in Cambria, California, which is mid-coast,
Show the
and
ocean.
I'm in the Crows.
There we go. The
Uh,
Pacific.
and since I'm Central Coast, I've got a fine Central Coast Chardonnay for tonight.
There you go. Very nice. Well, I came up with a cocktail finally after drinking the ales and the porters and that stuff for the first couple of because it was with the dwarves and the hobbits. That's what they're drinking, and the trolls were drinking that too. So I did design a drink for tonight, and it's kind of to take in a martini. I'm calling it the last homely house, or you could call it smells like elves if you want. Not smell like that, not earthy enough for elves, but that's what I was shooting for a little bit with the uh
Should elves smell earthy? I mean,
that
with
should
all
be
the
a part
Peter
of it.
Jackson
I
camera
think that
work,
should be
they're
part of it.
otherworldly.
There should be a part of it is earthy, part of it is very floral, that's I think it's all there. But it's gin, elderflower liqueur, lavender bitters. It's very nice. I had garnished with a thin slice of cucumber, which I wanted, and that was for me going to give it a kind of earthy taste. I didn't have any, and I forgot to get cucumbers, so I just got a little lemon peel in there, which is the opposite of the cucumber, but that's okay because it's good. Mm-mm. Rob, I thought that if people wanted a drink, so this is for Rivendell, obviously, and at Elrond's in the last homely house. If people wanted a drink for the goblins, I'm thinking like, it should be like a citywide special, right? Shot of Jim Beam and a Pabst Blue Ribbon. And then I started to wonder, and I'm asking the audience this, that's called a citywide special in Philly. Shot of Jim Beam or something like that. Can of Pabst Blue Ribbon could be something else too, but I wonder if other cities literally have a version of that they call a citywide special. So I don't know because I thought it was invented in Philly at Bob and Barber's. So
So I would say that if we want to make it more broad than just Philadelphia oriented, and if you want to stay with the sort of class differentiation that Tolkien does for the goblins, who are kind of like lesser, lower than working class, terrible dock workers, you know, um, that I think a Boilermaker where you actually drop that shot right into the beer
it's a good idea. Yeah.
sounds really
Yeah.
goblin to me, man.
I don't know if I've ever had a Boilermaker just because I just think that that doesn't
Uh,
like I wouldn't want one.
oh, your liver is missing out, I gotta say, which is not something I thought I would say to you. So,
Well, I don't drink to get drunk. So there you go.
me neither, man.
Well, although it could happen, let's just not hope it doesn't happen tonight. All of you, feel free to. I see some people are adding your drinks um uh to the chat, and feel free to send me any if you have anything you want me to try or any suggestions for cocktails or things for upcoming chapters. You can send them to me at epettit@rosenbach.org. Thank you all for tuning into this episode. And all of you joining us from past shows, past Biblioventures, and all of us new to this one, have fun in the chat. We bring our Biblioventure series to you for free, and there are many other Biblioventures series you can watch on our YouTube channel. If you would like to make a donation to the Rosenbach or become a member, we would sincerely appreciate your support. You can do this at rosenbach.org. Your support helps us create programs like this and also care for our collections. We have a great group of rotating co-hosts for the series, and tonight is my good friend Rob Barry. Rob trained as a painter and a cartoonist. He is probably best known for work in adapting James Joyce's Ulysses into a long-form graphic novel. He teaches that novel and comics at the University of Pennsylvania at Villanova and at the Rosenbach every year. He runs a great 18-week intensive Ulysses course. He has a longtime fixation on and obsession with the works of J.R.R. Tolkien as well, that he brings into all of his teaching. Occasionally, he still gets to paint pretty pictures that have nothing to do with either of those things. But one thing that you did draw that we have, it's all the way up in the top here, but so I should put it more centrally located. That's a tree beard that Rob did for me and gave me when he did, was that 31 days of drawing Tolkien or something you had done?
Yeah, so there's a thing that it started with cartoonists actually, that some people know about. It's called Inktober, and the goal originally was just to take a theme and for each day of October, spend no more than 15 minutes making an ink drawing of it. So, and I was like, "Yay, Lord of the Rings!" So I did a bunch of them.
They
So
were fun.
they were a lot of fun, and then we have Ed and we formed a local smile together.
We
Um,
did.
and at the end of that Inktober, I just was like, "Who wants one?" So
We did the Bagshot Row Irregulars of Philadelphia. We were meeting fairly frequently in the beginning for a couple of years, and then it slowed down a little bit. Then we met online the pandemic, and then we met online mostly after the pandemic, but it's really slowed down the last few, months, 6 months or so, because I have been a little bit busy.
yeah. Well, there have been these kinds of meetings, you know. We've
And we
also
could,
done other
yes.
taking people through the Lord of the Rings groups and stuff like that.
So, Rob, do you remember your first time reading The Hobbit?
Sadly, I don't think I do. But one of our friends from the last time we took people through Lord of the Rings together had mentioned today being horrified by what happens to some ponies. There'll be no spoilers yet. And like reading that as a child, I think I have some of that memory. But what's been interesting for me when you talked about doing this again and asked me to join on is I probably haven't read The Hobbit other than through the window of Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings. I haven't read The Hobbit for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have really great memories about how, like, I remember in Lord of the Rings thinking, these aren't the elves I thought they were, from like my childhood reading of The Hobbit. So, yeah. And it's one of those, what I think is wonderful about the book is it's, for many of us, it's one of our first books, at least for my generation.
There we go. Just making a note for later. It shows I'm paying attention. I'm taking notes on what you're saying, so I can ask. I think I'll follow that up with something later. Yeah, I'm
I'll
not
try
sure.
to stay noteworthy.
Yeah, I don't have a. I love that that we've had on the show Graham and Sarah and Sarah and other people I talk to. I love when they have these great moments of like oh, when I was this age or sick or something. And a lot of those books, I don't remember most of those childhood readings. I have a couple that I like are very firm and I remember them, but it's like Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff, and it's like it rarely comes up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have that. But also, Rob, you do so much work with Ulysses, and I would plug your Ulysses course, but it literally just sold out. Which is great. You take people through an
If you want to take 5 more, I'm up for it. But
intensive course. We'll see if anybody contacts us. But Tolkien and James Joyce, go.
So much. So it's funny. So when I teach a Ulysses class, a lot of my lectures, which are often available for them to see prior to the discussions that we have each week, I will tend to use things from Lord of the Rings as my go-to metaphor to explain time and how it works, or narratology, like the narrative positioning of things that seems to fracture so much in in Ulysses. And so it just became kind of an in-joke that every once in a while, like, how do I work Gandalf into this explanation? And so some of my past students had such a great time last year and I had a great time with them. I was like going, all right, let's just do Lord of the Rings. So I've started to build out that same sort of thing for Lord of the Rings. But I will say this. A lot of people give Ulysses the credit of being one of the most influential and important novels of the earlier part of the 20th century. Cracks the windows of modernism, all of that stuff. No less so for Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. And I would go to the mat with any academic who would try to say, there's no way that, that Tolkien is as important as Ulysses, because I could tell you for a fact it has had a greater effect upon many more lives over a longer haul and has formed more ethical centers for young people that they come back to over and over again. And also contemporary to Joyce, it is a book, Lord of the Rings is a book very much about war.
Yeah.
Very, very much. And explaining war to ourselves and to our children, as Ulysses is.
We'll get into some of those issues as we get towards the end of this series, that connections we can make with the real world of Tolkien's real world, and and experiences, and the Hobbit. It's mostly Lord of the Rings that you can really find all this stuff, but there are some interesting things in the Hobbit, I think, too, that
it's in there. It's in there. The more informed we get about Tolkien's life, and I don't mean just autobiographical, post-trauma stuff that people like to label. I mean, the more and more we get into his life and thinking about taking what he's learned and what he's experienced, and using it to explain his experiences and his learning to others, starting with his children, makes it like a fundamentally important kind of authorship.
Good. All righty. Well, everyone, our approach in this Biblioventure series is trying to imagine that you're just reading this novel alone without Lord of the Rings, as many people did. This was a standalone novel for 17 years before Lord of the Rings came out. But we will, so that's the main focus of the show, but we will have a segment at the end called the Thane's Book, in which we will talk about the greater resonance in the whole Tolkien legendarium, and because this book does become kind of, especially like as you were mentioning, Rob, as you came to this, or remember most coming to this after Silmarillion, Lord of the Rings, it does feel like a prequel if that's the direction that you take. And
well, we're reading it with this group. We're reading the revised edition. We're not reading the original edition.
Yeah.
So
I'll mention the major changes in it. So
you're going to talk about Wilderland, and there's all those changes that he made to overwrite the map. So so he's aware of that
stuff. Yeah. And no spoilers, everyone. No spoilers in the chat. We're only talking about chapters 3 and 4. Do not talk about things in chapter 5.
I can't see the chat for whatever
reason.
Even
though I want to. So, well, there's no chat on the Zoom. The chat's on the YouTube. You'd have to open up the YouTube and do all that. And so,
well, too bad for y'all. I can't see the chat.
All righty. Let us get started, because we have 2 chapters to get through, and then a Thane's Book today. Gandalf, where are we? Gandalf has saved the company from the trolls. He has explained his absence, Rob, but I don't think as satisfactorily as Thorin would have liked. And now they are off to Rivendell.
Thorin's a big baby.
So he's easily discomfited. He's easily annoyed. As Gandalf is too, I think. But
there are these figures in Germanic mythology that Tolkien knew really, really well, that I think Gandalf plays a big part in. certainly in the early parts of this book, and it gets altered by the time Lord of the Rings comes up, where he just, he'll give you what you want, he'll take you along, and he'll kind of like just disappear, and you're on your own, you know. And they're like these mountain spirits that do that in lore, and he's very much written that way. He's a guidepost, he's a provider, but he's clear throughout all of it, and it's pumped up more in this revised edition. But he's got something else going on, right? And don't count on him over much.
Yeah.
But he's pulled their fat out of the fire almost like consistently.
Although Thorin, for all his annoyance at little things, and he's to be relied on, and it's that even though he gets captured by the trolls, he shows that when he shows up, I'm the one that's going to fight here, and I'm the one that's going to at least take a shot at getting us out of this.
Yeah,
he's a leader, and
he is, but he's been relying on Gandalf over much.
Yeah, he needs to stop. But we'll have Gandalf back again now.
Okay, so Big Baby might have been a bit harsh.
All righty. Well, a short rest, chapter 3. They did not sing or tell stories. Things are a little more serious now that they've, faced the trolls, and it's becoming it's a more serious adventure. And then Bilbo looks up and he sees, the Misty Mountains and one of the peaks, and is that the mountain? And he has no conception of the world, as which this shows. He's just out in the world, out this far for the first time, and he can't imagine that anything that big wouldn't be the mountain that they're going to. Balin gives not only Bilbo but also the readers a little more scope here. That's only the beginning of the Misty Mountains, and then he mentions, we have to pass that or under it, the mountains, before we come into Wilderland, and it's Wilderland, capital W. And I was a little surprised that Wilderland's not in the dictionaries, and I looked at a few. It's not in the OED. It's not in a couple. Actually, it's in the OED in a quote from another part of this story where it's mentioned, but that's all. Like, it's not in there in any kind of entry. And Tolkien had written a guide to the names of the Lord of the Rings for foreign translators, and in that he has Wilderland, because they would have to then translate it into something. So he wanted to give him an idea of what he means by Wilderland. And he wrote an invention not actually found in English, and it's still not, based on wilderness, originally meaning country of wild creatures not inhabited by men, but with a side reference. And I love this. This is because this is Tolkien as the word man, right? A side reference to the verbs wilder, meaning to wander astray, and bewilder. So, or I guess it would be wilder, meaning wander astray, and bewilder. It is supposed to be the common speech name of Rivendell on the map, not in the text. The lands east of the Misty Mountains, including Mirkwood, as far as the river running. The Dutch version has Wilderland. Dutch has wilderness, but not German or the Scandinavian language. So the map on the end pages of the book have this. Here's the copy at the Rosenbach on the end papers here. As you open it up, this is the map. See, it's Wilderland in the bottom corner. So this is an area of the place, and it's its place name on this map. We are not looking at the side or to the right here. This is where we are. Here's Rivendell. But all this area, it kind of crossed the Misty Mountains, but also including where Rivendell is the Wilderland. Because we have Edge of the Wild right here, and that'll be mentioned in this chapter too. That this is, see on the left here, Edge of the Wild. Now it's all Wilderland,
and it clearly places for us at the idea of Rivendell as the last homely house,
Yeah.
right? It's very much about that, this map.
And this is interesting because this is in the front end papers here of the book we have at the Rosenbach. Here's the list of illustrations in the first American edition. And it says end paper 1, Thror's map. And then at the end, end paper 2 at the back of the book, map of Wilderland. But they're reversed.
Right.
It was a misprint in the first American edition. Wilderland goes in the front and Thror's map goes in the back. So there we go. Little book information for you guys. Little edition nerdery. They are now moving into the he says you are come to the very edge of the wild. Hidden somewhere ahead of us is the fair valley of Rivendell, where Elrond lives in the last homely house. That's a great name, last homely house, isn't it, Rob?
I'm sorry?
Last homely house. It's
I
such a
love it.
great, that's a great name for it. Which I think, and I'm sure it would have confused me when I was young. I'd have been like, homely, because homely has come to mean kind of not just plain, but ugly, plain ugly.
So we see this a lot in Tolkien, and this is because he's kind of a cusp writer in terms of knowing so much about the origin of words that he plays often with their duplicity.
Yeah.
You know, and we'll find it over and over again. Your whole thing about Wilderland and Bewilder is a great example of that. And he does the naming a lot of times too. So it's always good stuff to watch for that.
By the early 20th century, the word had really moved into mostly meaning very plain, somebody who would be at home all the time. But it's originally comfortable like home, right? That's what it's about, a place where you can really have the comforts of home. But in the manuscript, it was the last decent house, which is terrible. A great example of him realizing decent. No, it's more than there's more than decency about this place, more than that kind of,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure in that point in the manuscript how much he wanted to amp up the magical nature of Elrond and the elves, or even how many elves were expected to be there, because Elrond is already a creation of that half elven. But spoilers, we'll deal with that later.
Well, it's later. That's not for this book, but well, this land, as he's describing it, the way he kind of hints around that this is a kind of magical place, it was indeed a much wider land from the ford to the mountains than ever you would have guessed. We have a couple instances of this where this like, wait, this it shouldn't be this big, or the fact that the house is kind of hidden and you can't find it. Well, you just, all you got to do is get some directions and you can find it. But it's difficult to find. That kind of it's a fairyland kind of place, right? Normal rules don't necessarily apply. If you or I went that way, it's not likely we would find it unless we knew exactly where we're going, like Gandalf does.
Yeah, but and we don't see as much of it as is developed in his later thoughts. We do know that in this edition, those thoughts have already permeated. By the time he's done this, he's revisited Rivendell in his writing for Fellowship, but we don't get treated to all the things about it that we do here. We get the magic of the elves, but it's a different magic.
Yeah, it's very different. We'll get to the elves in a second here. But Gandalf seems to know his way pretty well, and then they come to the edge of a steep fall in the ground so suddenly that Gandalf and his horse nearly slip over the edge, and there it is. They see the valley far below. They could hear the voice of hurrying water in a rocky bed at the bottom. The scent of trees was in the air, and there was light on the valley side across the water. Now, here's where I want to show one of the illustrations. This isn't the Rivendell illustration, the color illustration from the first American edition. This is actually an early iteration that he had done of Gandalf riding down into Rivendell. Um, and then he'll change this conception for later. This looks almost too flat. Like there's not enough hidden about this, I think. And also, and what's it called? Riding down into Rivendell. And also, he's forgotten that Gandalf shouldn't be in a red cloak, but a gray one. But
And did you see this in the flesh? I think this was at the Morgan show, which I didn't see. Did you see this in the?
I think I did. I think it was, yeah.
Do you have no recollection of its size?
I don't remember exactly.
Small,
No,
I know that.
It'll tell me in the Art of the Hobbit if I get it out, but I'm not.
And I think that what's important here, speaking as as an artist that picks this stuff apart all the time, and I know you wanted me to do that. It's clearly made with pen and ink first, and addition of not watercolor, but probably a colored pencil or crayon added to it. And you can sort of read the scale of it. This is clearly a sketch, right? But for people who like to look at art, a lot can be said from sketch. And Tolkien would later say that he really felt that understanding his stories through their environment in illustration was more important than central figure. This is another example of where central figure is totally only placed there for a sense of scale.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell anything about that figure riding.
Yeah.
I mean, you even get the horse's ass instead of anything else, right? And it's really there for sense of scale. And it's a great one because unlike some of the more compacted, really beautiful illustrations in the first edition that he did, this sketch gives you a sense of how grand he thinks the landscape of the legendarium should be.
Well, here's the one. This is how it looks in the first American edition, and then see the house in the center there, and I'll give it easier to see picture of it here. In the version in the book, they cut off this lovely, bordered title illustration down the bottom on the bottom that says Rivendell. But this is the one that goes out with the book. What do you think?
It's absolutely beautiful. What's peculiar about Tolkien in terms of as an illustrator is he would have, for that age, been considered totally a dilettante. He didn't study to be an illustrator. He only studied art because of his mother's interest in it and his own as a child. And he makes numerous mistakes in the illustrations he turns in that are not consistent with printing process at the time and therefore couldn't be used. And that's a really complex thing about, what it means to be an illustrator. Somebody put in the chat that they thought that sketch shouldn't make Rivendell look so open. And this one is a great example of it doesn't look open. Yeah. This is a Rivendell, right? This is a hidden valley that you're coming into. And important, as we read in the book, those stairs on the right lower corner, that's how they're coming down. So you're not even coming in with this view. This is the view. Today it would be a dolly shot or a drone shot, right? Like you wouldn't even be able to get that view from anywhere else. It's totally a hidden place in the valley.
And as they go in, the text is the air grew warmer, the smell of pine trees made him drowsy. Bilbo starts to fall asleep, their spirits rose. That to me is hinting that there's a magical quality to this place that affects the way you feel about things. And then we have my favorite line of these chapters today. It smells like elves. And then he looks up at the stars and they're burning bright and blue, which is unusual. You don't usually hear, frequently have people describe stars as burning blue in the sky. Um, but um, but it's this entry into this magical world that, and in the manuscript, he had feels like elves. And then he changed that to smells to make it a more, specific, sensation going on with Bilbo.
Yeah, exactly. It's more sensual that way because he's already talking about the smells coming into it.
Yeah.
He's not really, when you're constructing your drink, it should be at those with those other kinds of plants that he's talking about as he comes into the valley,
Yeah.
not like the body odor of elves. So.
Yes.
Smells elven, like Q. Peter Jackson's, fuzzy lighting and that ethereal music. So.
Well, uh the elves now have a song.
Yes, they do.
And it's especially if you come at this book from Lord of the Rings, it's unusual. And
La
we'll talk
la
about
la
differences
lally.
later, but I just not what we expect, but this is what readers are given. This is what readers at the time know. And Oh, what are you doing, or where are you going? Your ponies need shoeing, the river is flowing. Oh, tra-la-la-lally, here down in the valley. Um, uh,
So, if I could speak to that one a minute, I think the best way to read this earlier version of the elves, which confuse a number of readers that come at it from Lord of the Rings, is to go towards. It's not the end of the chapter, but it's this end of the section before an indentation. Hush, hush, good people, and good night, said Gandalf, who came last. Valleys have ears, and some elves have over merry tongues.
yeah.
Good night. And this is because if you go through and lose kind of just the sing song quality that makes it seem so lighthearted, these are omniscient elves. They know what's going on before the dwarves have even come and said anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
There is a magical power being evidenced here by these elves that will carry through into other readings that you will
Yeah.
do. And it may seem silly, but it's really meant to make the dwarves seem silly. You know,
I see
like,
what you
oh,
mean.
your
Yeah.
horse, your ponies need shoeing. Like, what are you doing? Come on. And so because maybe they aren't all about the quest if they understand what it is.
Well,
So,
yeah. I mean, they show that they have this knowledge, that they're aware of the world outside, they're aware of everybody here and who they are, what they're doing. Um, but and yeah, and they kind of poke fun at them. Uh, but they're also, it's, they're joyful, they're playful, they're a little silly. And I think the impression we get is this is their view of the world because they are in this beautiful, perfect place. Now, they know the world, so they're not so closed off from it. It's not quite Ivory Tower in that they're not aware of what's going on and they're not, but they get to, I don't know. It feels like
well,
they get
that's
to
a cusp
experience their
moment, what you
best
just
life.
said. That is a cusp moment for people who come at it through
Yeah.
other sources first, whether they be the movies or whether they be LTR, is that they seem too joyful, where in many other places, um, elves of this period and of this age are mournful,
Well,
right?
the final words of that song is, the daylight is dying, to fly
Mm-hmm.
jolly, to fly would be folly, to stay would be jolly. Don't go off into the dark. Stay here and have fun with us. And listen and hark till the end of the dark to our tune. Ha ha. Literally ends with a laugh.
Yep. Yep.
That this is their way of being in the world. We're not guiding events. We know about them, but these elves singing this song at least are here to, you know, bring kind of joy, right? To people.
Or convince others to
Yeah.
seek joy.
Yeah. And it also says Bilbo loved elves, though he seldom met them, which means he does meet them sometimes. So this is a world where you do meet elves sometimes. If Bilbo's out walking around the Shire, or just, he might meet an elf. But he's also a little frightened of them. That there's an otherworldliness to them that can seem a little frightening to a very, conventional person, I imagine.
Yeah.
And
I want to also make a kind of a narratology thing here too. Again, this is what I was talking about with Joyce.
Yeah.
A lot of times you want to look at the narrative positioning and this free discourse that is going on in this book that Tolkien pulled away from later because he felt like it was like talking down to children. But he uses expressions here. Thorin and his friends think them foolish, which is a very foolish thing to think. Then off they went into another song as ridiculous as the one I have written down in full. So the parenthetical use of which is a very foolish thing to think means an aside to, the people you're talking or writing to. And then the ones that I have written down here in full means that there is some kind of manuscript happening, and I think that's important because we can have this comment or we can, when we're looking at the narratology of the Hobbit, as to whether this is something spoken to an audience or spoken and then recorded.
You mean the whole story itself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are questions to be asked about the narrative positioning that goes on. When it talks about, there's a thing about black as a top hat, right? And you're like, that's clearly written for a modern audience to understand and doesn't follow with what might have been the book that Bilbo would have written.
Yeah.
It means there's this other narrator. And again, probably at some point in Thane's book, we'll do the thing about the ruins on the outside, So I don't think you and Graham did that much, did you?
I think we did mention. I think it's been mentioned already. But anyway,
but
this kind of, because I did talk about this, there's this sense of the narrator is not only gives you the sense that because the narrator gives the sense that I'm telling you this story now that Bilbo once wrote before, that that it's this double, it's pulling you in two different ways. You're there with the company in Rivendell, but you're also sitting next to the narrator telling you a story at the same time. And it's, Dickens does this in Christmas Carol at one point in a scary moment. And he says, as if I'm over your shoulder right now, whispering to you. So you get this, you get it all in there. And I think it works exceptionally well, even though Tolkien didn't like it as much as he went on.
Well, he just felt that the creation of this story had come from a story he told to his children. And he thought of it in its construction as a children's book. And then as his children grew older, he came to realize that children don't like to be talked to in quite that tone of voice, And so
I guess his didn't.
Yeah.
But I've never found that.
Yeah,
So
that
I
could be
find
true.
I've always found as a storyteller and doing stories that it's involved, and not just children, but with adults too. You're involving them in the story. You're acknowledging their presence. You're bringing them in,
Yeah.
and it frequently works. Now it depends on the kind of story you're telling too. Of course, there are some times where you don't want to break the wall of the story. You just want them to imagine they're in the story, and that's not a time you want to do it. But
And
for a fun
like I
adventure,
also teach creative writing, so I'm always getting people to look at that aspect of why he chooses those, moments within his writing.
mhm.
You know, how do you engage?
We also get to see Gandalf in this part and how he reacts. He was off his horse among the elves, talking merrily with them, that he gets along well with them. Um, uh, and then you are a little out of your way, said the elf. I get there's like there's like an anonymous elf here that
Mhm.
we don't need to know who it is. It's just
Yeah,
one of those elves, but they have this. They're very hospitable. They want us to stay. They want them to stay. They're preparing supper, and when they want them to stay, I mean, they want them to stay literally where they are outside there, where they're fixing breakfast or supper over a fire. Instead, the dwarves and Bilbo and Gandalf go inside the house, into the last and only house instead with Elrond. But they have a charm about them. And that for people that encounter them, I think Elvish singing is not a thing to miss in June under the stars. Not if you care for such things. So we're gonna have a sing along. So there we go.
oh, I should also point out um, that when Gandalf returns um, to the party and overthrows the trolls, um, he says, "I was looking ahead," and Thorin says, "How did you know to come back?" By looking back, right? But he also says that he encountered some friends,
Yeah,
right? So he set this all up, right? And at the beginning of this chapter, he says, "We're going to go here," because he
yeah,
set this all up.
yeah,
Um, so how much we know or how much the elves know through Gandalf is unknown to the reader.
yeah. Well, and they're not in a hurry, but the dwarves are, they're on the move. They're like, this is our mission. We have to go do it. And yet,
They
they,
don't know that they're in a hurry until after this chapter.
yet they stay for 14 days,
Yeah,
which is more than just stopping. And that's the short rest. I mean, it's a joke, a short rest. It's not. They stay for 14 days.
I don't know if anyone has ever done. I'm sure they have um, a timeline for the Hobbit.
Oh yeah, there are. Yeah, you can
They
get
got to be out there. I
dates.
haven't
Yeah,
looked
you can
for
get all
any.
the dates to it. You can look them up online.
Yeah,
You can find the whole timeline, and
but of
it's
course,
and you go in the atlas that where Diane Wynne Feinstad made. She's got the whole journey, and she's got it all by the
I
date.
thought so. But like I said, I haven't had cause to study the Hobbit for
Yeah.
that depth, so I don't really know. Um, but
Well, we know what it is. They arrive here in the beginning of June. They're there for 14 days, or in June, and then they go to midsummer. That's when they look for
well,
them.
but they also don't know. They haven't had the reading of the map yet, and so they
Yeah,
don't know where they need to be on Durin's Day.
yeah. They don't know yet.
The moon letters haven't been read.
Yeah.
Not a spoiler. We're talking about it tonight.
The Uh, Bilbo would gladly have stopped there forever and ever, even supposing a wish would have taken him right back to his hobbit hole without trouble. So this is the only mention where it's not like where Bilbo's not wishing he could be back home. This is the place that he'd rather be instead of home, and he will
Yeah.
get his wish later. So, um, they now we get Elrond in our first introduction to the master of the house. Um, and we get these tantalizing bits of the long history of this world, the lore about it, things that the reader is not privy to. These things come into many tales. Um, but the beginning of whose fathers came into the strange stories before the beginning of history, the wars of the evil goblins and the elves and the first men in the north. Um, and Elrond was master of the house. As master of the house was their chief. Um, this sense that there is a greater world out there. Um, but then we get a firm description of him here. He's noble, he's fair in face, he's strong as a warrior, wise as a wizard, venerable as the king of the dwarves, as a king of dwarves, and kind as summer.
Yeah, I love
I
that.
love that. And that because that brings him back to also nature. He's kind of in this kind of natural cycle. But do you know, in the manuscript, the first manuscript, he was kind as Christmas.
Oh, I
Um,
love that
which
better.
I really love, but I'm a Christmas kid. So,
Yeah,
like I love
me too.
Christmas. Yeah, Christmas and Halloween are the two that I love. So, but that also then becomes that's a real intrusion. That's like a holiday that, people in Tolkien's world celebrate, our world really celebrate. That becomes a little too intrusive, I think. I'm not surprised that he changed it, but what he changed it to works really well. Kind as summer.
Yeah, I mean, also I like this next sentence. He comes into many tales, but his part in the story of Bilbo's great adventure is only a small one, though
Yeah.
important,
Yeah.
as you will see if we ever get to the end of it.
Yeah. There's that narrator coming in with a funny little line there, like
It
almost speeding himself on here.
yeah, and we're not entirely certain. One of the things that I think is interesting about this book is, as we read the second version of it, is how much it has to do with the rewritten version of the Red Book of Westmark. Like, is that a nod to how important Elrond becomes in the whole broader story of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings together,
Mhm.
or just in the end of this? And again, I don't want to do this by adding spoilers, but these are the sorts of questions that we would have of the hints and clues that an author is dropping in for us to make us think about the breadth of the world.
Mhm.
When you say, if we ever get to the end of it, the audience goes, wait, what? There's more? What? Oh, more? Um, and it's great. It's great technique, And we do know that by the time he came to do the revisions in the second edition, he decided how to use Elrond in the work. So
Well, whether you liked food or sleep or work or storytelling or singing or just sitting and thinking best, this is the place for you. There's something wrong with that. What the heck is work doing in there? Okay, food, sleep, work? No, work is the thing you
work
don't
doesn't
want to
happen for
do
the
when you're doing all these other things. But I guess, hey, hey, my work is great, but I think that's
we
funny.
yeah we move to the work that we want to do if we can.
That's if you're there, you do, yeah.
If you can, you do.
This house provides whatever you wish best, like that's what you can find there. That's a kind of magical quality about it. It seems like a magic place if the things that you love you suddenly just get to do and not have to worry about a schedule or anything. So they wind up there for 14 days, of course. And the place keeps out evil. It is evil things did not come into that valley. This is a protected place for them.
Yep.
Well,
Let's go past the naming of the swords. Maybe we do that in the next.
no, we're doing the swords.
You want to do it now? Okay.
Yeah, well, we got to do the naming of the swords. So, because this is where it is, because Elrond then
Yeah,
looks
but
at the
it's in the next
swords.
chapter too, Ed.
No, they're just in there. But right now he gets it. Well, that's okay. We can be quicker next chapter. We don't have to stop then and do them. Um, Elrond knew all about runes of every kind because there's runes on these swords that they said they when they found them and that they would find somebody that could read them, and here's the person that can read them. They're old swords of the high elves of the West. Now, in the first edition of it, it is the swords of the elves that are now called gnomes. Now, if you say gnomes to people now, they think the little guy with the red hat and the beard and the garden gnome. Like that's like gnomes has become kind of co-opted by that. But even in Tolkien's day, gnomes had become what used to be a more general magical creature had become, too generalized or specific. And you had mentioned things that like there's pygmy associations with it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, clearly. I mean, uh, Tolkien says in a letter, the word was used as a translation of the real name, according to my mythology, of the high elven people of the West, pedantically associating it with the Greek gnome, thought or intelligence.
yeah,
But I have abandoned it since, and it's quite impossible to disassociate the name from the popular associations of Paracelsus equals Pygmaeus.
yeah,
Gnomes, according to Paracelsus, were elemental creatures of the earth, living underground and able to move through the earth as freely as if it were air. In popular tradition, gnomes have often been equated with dwarves and goblins, which is
yeah,
why we have those garden gnomes
yeah,
have already started to take place in British culture at the time. And so he has to abandon this original Latin word that he wanted to call the elves that
yeah.
were wise, in favor of that.
And we'll get into high elves, what he means by that when we do the Thanes book a little later.
Yeah.
But there's also a little more of the history of the world we can talk about later in the Thanes book. But for now, it's giving us this big picture of there's all kinds of events have happened in this fantastical world. They were made in Gondolin for the Goblin Wars. Dragons and goblins destroyed Gondolin many ages ago. So this is all this kind of mini world building, very cursory world building, at least just in the sense that there is a world out there that the characters are aware of, but the reader still doesn't know what it is yet. And we'll
I
get
don't want to tip into the Thanes book stuff too much, but there might be 6 people or things within the world of the legendarium of Middle Earth that would even recognize these swords, and happily, like, clearly, even Gandalf
we'll
wasn't
get
one
into
of
it
them.
later. We'll get into it later because there's a reason Elrond recognizes the
Yeah.
sword. But then he says he even knows their names. These swords have names. I love swords with names. One is called Orcrist or Goblin Cleaver, and the other that's Thorin's, and Gandalf's is now called Glamdring, which means foe hammer. And the King of Gondolin once used that. That was his sword, the King of Gondolin. I love stored name, Excalibur. Beowulf was given a sword at one point to go fight Grendel's mother, Hrunting. So there's a tradition of this, famously named sword that he's drawing on. But for Glamdring, it's a Sindarin word, means faux hammer, and it's literally that. It's, the glam is a word in Tolkien's invented language, Sindarin, that means a shouting or confused noise, but it also people use it for to say like a bunch of orcs or a body of orcs. A dring is just to beat or strike. So it's to beat or strike this group of orcs, foe hammer, the foes, in this case being the, orcs or goblins. Orcrist, and this is to remember orc. The word orc isn't used in this, but most people know that that's the word that's used throughout the rest of the legendarium. He only uses goblins in this, but orc equals goblin. They're the same creature in this world. And it's okay to talk about it because we have a sword named Orcrist, which there's the Noldoran word risto, meaning to rend or rip, and Noldoran is a precursor to Sindarin. We haven't talked about this much, Rob, the way that
You're so
Tolkien.
deep in the Thanes book right now.
Well, no, but it's okay to Tolkien created
Great.
just briefly.
I'm
Tolkien
down.
created languages to then go on and tell his stories based on words in those languages, and it's really present when you see words like this, and you wonder, well, how did he come up with that word? How he came up with it is he invented it, sometimes basing it on other languages, some of his vocabulary, but sometimes coming up with vocabulary on his own that he creates a whole etymology of, the kind of the cultural history usage of a word that then tells a story. And he also has a keen sense of the sound of words too, right, Rob? That kind of
Mhm.
that kind of phone aesthetics where, how a word sounds kind of evokes something. And Elven language is usually very euphonious. Um, Goblin language is very cacophonous, guttural.
We're going to get that with the Goblin
The
song.
way he designs these kinds of languages. But we get very little of them in The Hobbit. It's something that you'll get in the rest of the legendarium, but you do see it in names of things. And this is how he's come up with these names.
Ed, in response to that, and also in interest of time, I think I would tease that forward without spoilers. Um, to tell people that Tolkien said on a couple of occasions, even though it's a little bit of an offhanded comment because we know that he wrote these things for other reasons. He has said that the stories came to mind to explain the shifts in languages that were interesting to him when he was creating languages.
Yeah.
You know, um, that's the level and depth of his early childhood playfulness with language, right? Is to create these other kinds of languages and then dream up an entire history of a world, sometimes closely akin to our own and sometimes not, depending on where he stood in his creation. Um, but language is a core, like a really fundamental core of his creation.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go more than that because we have
No,
so much.
and I just want people to be aware of that that
Yeah,
this is part of the way he creates is he'll take words and then create things out of them, or if he needs something, he has to go to words that he has created to then embody this world and then give it real substance. So
yeah, and it's like orc even comes from another word called rick, right?
yeah.
Which comes from another word in Quenya. So it's about how language gets fractured often as much as about how it comes together.
Well, Elrond doesn't only know about swords, he knows about maps. And he says, let's see the map. And then they show him the map, Thror's map that they have. And here is the map. And then Gandalf, or I'm sorry, but then Elrond notices something about, oh, what's this written here? And there's apparently moon letters on this map. Letters that you can only see written in runes that you can only see under the same moon on the same day under the same phase of the moon that they were originally written. And if you see in the right under here under desolation of Smaug, there they are. And then they show up.
Yeah.
And they well, I'll get to what they spell in a minute. When Tolkien had done the first edition of this and these maps, he wanted to do a special effect for the map in the book, and he created a map that he that he sent to the publishers, but then they couldn't put it in, and they said, no, the map's going to be on the end papers. It's not going to be one page in. But what he did was, when you look at the map without the runes on it here, and then if you hold it up to a light, what happens is suddenly you see the runes behind it if you held it to a light. He wanted to do this for the edition, and they said, no, we can't do that. And it's an easy effect. It's just the back of it is black and the letters are printed backwards. So that's all you need to do for this effect here. And you could read it that way. This is nice because you can get one of these in that nice gift edition of the facsimile of the first edition. So it comes this way with this. So I love
So
that.
Ed, I'm going to do a little narratology thing here again, and also a little reminder, because people forget this, especially when they see it as a children's story. Sure, you've got an unexpected party is part one. You remember the forward? The forward here is about runes and how runes get used and how runes get translated, what runes mean in terms of dwarven runes, which would have been different than the runes that he's using. And so this actually tends to place the book in a narrative frame of being somebody who's translated the book from runes as the maps were written in, and is giving them to you again, right? It's that informed frame of an audience that Michael Drought talks about, particularly in his latest book, which I can't tell people enough about. Please go get The Tower in the Ruin. But it's right back there. But seriously, that's a frame thing, and we've forgotten about it because we tended to look over the forward as sort of a too academic. We forget about it in terms of the story.
And it's not a first edition thing. That's later editions.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, we're not experiencing, unless you're uber rich and you just happen to have one on your bookshelf, we're not really experiencing first edition.
or in the place that you work that has rare books. But
you get to show us. You don't get to read it.
Yes. Well, I can read it there. And anybody can read it there because anybody is allowed to set up an appointment
put up the donate to the Rosenbach thing again.
Well, anybody can visit the Rosenbach, and you set up an appointment to go and see things, and that's one of the things you could choose to see, and you can go in the reading room and we'll bring it out to you, and that's all free. But that's a good moment to thank everyone for watching this episode. As a nonprofit organization, the Rosenbach Museum and Library depends on the generosity of friends and supporters like you to keep programs like this free and accessible to thousands of fellow biblioventurers worldwide. I hope you will consider supporting the Rosenbach and this show by donation, which you can do at our website, or you can become a member. Membership gives you free museum admission, discounts on programs and courses, and early access to registration. You can learn more about how to become a member on our website. We have a great many programs and courses at the Rosenbach, including many online. You can register still for courses that we have coming up. There's a course that starts this week on Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials, led by Kristen Poole. I know she's going to spend a bit of that class talking about the influence of John Milton's Paradise Lost on the Dark Materials novels. This should be really interesting.
That's nice.
There are a bunch of courses coming up. Ulysses Weekly, taught by Rob Berry. There is, of course, Shakespeare's Green Worlds with Sir Jonathan Bate, Stendhal's Charterhouse of Parma, Dickens's Bleak House, Latin American short fiction, medieval T.S. Eliot, Anne Bronte. And if you're looking for more Biblioventures, I do a show called Sherlock Monthly. Once a month, we cover a Sherlock Holmes adventure, one story at a time, in the order that they were published. We just finished the Adventure of the Wisteria Lodge, and the Adventure of Bruce Partington Plans is coming up. All of those Biblioventures, all the past episodes we've done for that Sherlock Monthly, are available on the Rosenbach's YouTube channel, as well as other shows: Dracula, Frankenstein, Jane Eyre, Pride and Prejudice, Pickwick Papers, Jekyll and Hyde, Christmas Carol. There's lots of Biblioventures fun out there for all you guys. And I thank all of you who are supporting the Rosenbach through donation or by becoming members and allowing us to create all of these shows that we do, including The Hobbit. Well, the moon letters read, "Stand by the gray stone when the thrush knocks, and the setting sun with the last light of Doran's day will shine upon the keyhole." So the runes that they could see said there's a secret door here, and now the runes that they couldn't see, the secret runes, said will tell them how they can see the keyhole because they have a key. Gandalf also had a key that he gave to Thorin. And what I love about this, Rob, is that there was a secret way to read the runes, And there's also a secret day that you have to go and do, like a secret revelation for the day itself. Like they have to be there on Midsummer's Day, and the moon has to be like this. So
And you have to have
everything.
the freaking key.
So yes, and you have to have the key. So um it's it's
Now,
not easy, but they've got all the pieces to at least get into the second door now. They didn't know this before. They would have just shown up and not known. But
I told
luckily, they were there on the day that he could read it. And Elrond says, and it's the last light of Durin's day, and then Thorin goes crazy over this. Durin, he was the father of the fathers of the eldest race of dwarves, the Longbeards. Hey, any group of people that you want to
all the
call
long beards.
long beards, I am totally in favor of. And my first ancestor, I am his heir. Um, so um, and then what is Durin's Day? Asked Elrond. Elrond doesn't know something. I'm a little fascinated by that.
That's fantastic. I was hoping you were going to get that.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised at
Elrond
that. But
says, "What is
Elrond,
Durin's Day?" Because guess what? Elves and dwarves don't get along, and Elrond doesn't give a fuck about your dwarvish calendar.
he doesn't.
That's
And
really what it is.
dwarves and elves do have their, I mean,
It's complicated.
it's very
It's complicated.
complicated, the issues that they've had. But what's really interesting here is that I think what it says here is that the dwarves have things that not even the elves are aware of, and
Yeah.
that they are a more secretive. Well, there are secretive people like the elves are secretive, and like people won't know a lot about the elves, um, and that the dwarves also are secretive because we've already established in this that the elves know what's going on in the world, but they don't seem to know something about the dwarves, which says there are limitations to their knowledge, and those limitations are put up by the dwarves themselves.
And I know we need to get into the next chapter, and
Which we're
that's
going
great.
to.
I do want to hang something out here for people who are, they've read it before, but I don't want to make it a spoiler. But a former student that's in our Rosenbeck Readers group today was asking about, Gandalf's role and some other things. There's a wonderful piece that you can find probably on the internet. If somebody wants to put it in the chat, please do. It's in numerous other books like History of Middle Earth and in the Anderson annotated Hobbit called The Quest for Erebor. And we hope to get a chance to handle it on this show. Maybe we will, maybe we won't.
It'll be much later.
Yeah, but if you're really coming here because you really love it,
And I'd
a
say
lot of people
only for
never
people
found
who
it.
know everything.
Yeah,
If you know this book already, and you've also read Lord of the Rings, yeah, that's
then do that. But
don't read it otherwise.
exactly. But it was intended to be in the appendices, and it's Gandalf telling the Fellowship about he's retelling this story from his position
Yeah,
about why he was involved and why he chose
yeah.
Bilbo.
He gives details that we don't know in reading this book. So,
Yeah,
and you don't even know reading Lord of the Rings. This is all told after that. This is a
yeah.
separate piece.
So
Yeah,
it's really great. People will love it if they're experienced
yeah.
Tolkien readers. So
All right. Before we get to the next chapter, there we get an elf concert here. They dance and sing upon Midsummer's Eve. I guess a little, elf halftime show we get. Um,
mhm.
and everybody is refreshed and ready. They rode away amid songs of farewell and good speed, their hearts ready for more adventure, and with the knowledge of the road they must follow over the Misty Mountains to the land beyond. Everything's going to be fine. Everything's they got directions, and they've got and they've got information about the end of their trip. They're good, right?
Yeah, sure.
Well,
Mirkwood, Schmirkwood.
they go up into the Misty Mountains. Misty Schmisty, whatever. They first they uh go up into the Misty Mountains, and they go in the right pass, and the far, far away in the west. They could see Bilbo looks out where things were blue and faint. Bilbo knew there lay his own country of safe and comfortable things and his little hobbit hole. So again, Bilbo thinking about the past. And Tolkien does a little picture of the mountain path. Well, they go up and it's, storms and all kinds of things going on, but it's his conception of that Rivendell picture we saw earlier, Rob, and now of these mountains are all inspired by a personal thing in his life, right? You want to talk about that?
Sure. I mean, there was a trip in Sweden to the mountain pass in
Switzerland.
Switzerland, sorry,
Yeah.
in Waterbruden, and actually you can see elements of those photos that of that area that inform the Rivendell picture, but particularly here. Now, I am absolutely enchanted by this illustration, partly because I draw in ink this way quite often. And this kind of contour shading that people are familiar with from woodcuts is really, really strong and echoes a certain kind of a time period. And Tolkien's use of it here is absolutely masterful, right? It truly is. Those lines in the lower right quarter of the drawing and the breadth of them give you some sense of the contours of the mountains, the sky and its darkening, the light coming not just from the lightning, but like surrounding the lightning like a corona, and how it overwhelms the sort of dot pattern of the mountains that are on the other side of the lightning. There's just great space, great flatness. This is a masterful illustration, especially from somebody who was not trained to be an illustrator.
I love the effect of it that you mentioned, the woodcut, that it almost looks like it looks like it's an engraving, taking from an engraving, but it's not. It's drawn to look this way.
Yeah, it looks like what we would call a soft woodcut, where your lines tend to be broader and not so narrow, but also bolder, right? And it also still has this weird kind of a dot pattern of a pass on the right hand side that loops around. See that almost kind of a road.
Yeah.
And see how we see it again in the distance on the left. And you're like, how the fuck do I get from here to there? It's just a really masterful drawing of atmosphere.
Yeah.
That illustration ideally should add to the mystery of the experience of the reader. I believe, and I think Tolkien did too as he came into it in later life. I don't want to see so much what Bilbo looks like. I want to be in the same space that Bilbo's in. And this one does it masterfully, I think.
Yeah. And there's a storm going on as they're trying to climb up these paths. It's more than a thunderstorm, a thunder battle. We get the stone giants throwing boulders at each other. It's a dangerous trip. Some of that goes back to the trip that Tolkien took in 1911 with his brother and his aunt and a bunch of others, that as they were walking along the pass, rocks would come flying down every now and then. And could easily hit somebody, but it's just luck that you don't get hit with these, rocks falling off of the mountain as you're walking along. So he writes about this in a letter to one of his sons later, telling him the story of it. Well, they.
Yeah, I just want to mention something that I just noticed in the chat, because I did finally turn on the chat. Somebody mentioned that how back in the day everyone with an education was taught in art. And that's true in some areas, and certainly within Tolkien's background, and I'm not negating that. Imagine then how much better were the people who had continued that education to become professional artists. The idea that Tolkien, as a writer and as a professor of philology at Oxford, would be allowed to illustrate his own work is a really great accomplishment that shouldn't be overlooked. So
yeah. It's becoming very alarming. They need to get some shelter. Gandalf knows how evil and danger had grown and thriven in the wild since the dragons had driven men from the lands and the goblins had spread in secret after the Battle of the Mines of Moria. A little bit on that later. Gandalf knows that this is a dangerous place for them to be in, and maybe they should find some shelter. Well, they send Philly and Killy, the two youngest dwarves, to look. It was absolutely no use sending Bilbo. We get, as an aside in the text. There is nothing I love this little aphoristic
yeah,
narration here.
Thanks, great. Yeah.
There's nothing like looking if you want to find something, or so Thorin said to the young dwarves. You certainly usually find something if you look, but it is not always quite the something you were after. So it proved on this occasion. That's just, I'm charmed by that narrator coming in and saying things like that.
There's an interesting thing here too, and that's that this section's not in quotes. Or so Thorin said to the young dwarf. This is a narrator's aside. This is a narrator's mention. You know, he doesn't put it in quotes.
Yeah,
he puts the other stuff. And again, this is that narratology stuff that we want to look at with him. So it proved on this occasion. He does it so that he can move into that sort of foreshadowing moment. That pregnant pause, that last, I don't know, what is it, 5-word sentence will create,
Gandalf says, have you thoroughly explored it, this cave that they find? Of course they have. Well, that, of course, is the dangerous part about caves. You don't know how far they go back sometimes, or where a passage behind may lead to, or what is waiting for you inside, or whether or not cracks can just suddenly appear in the wall. And Philly and Killy, of course, don't know this. I mean, this isn't their fault. But then it says, Rob, Gandalf, it says he lit up his wand.
Yeah.
And that, I think this, wait a minute, Gandalf has a wand in The Hobbit? He does. This is, not the only time that we'll see this. But we think he's got a staff, right? Well, I think that Tolkien may still mean staff here, in the sense that Gandalf, we mentioned this in the last episode, that was one of the names he pulled out of this list of dwarf names from this Old Norse, from the Old Norse Nettas, and this long list of names. And it was originally Thorin's name. He was called Gandalf. Gandalf was Bledorthin. But the name itself, Gandalfr, it's composed of Gondr, which means wand or staff or magic, and the Alfr part, elf. So it's elf with a wand or elf with a staff. The wand and staff are really...
They're indistinguishable
in
the context that he's using them.
So even though we think wand, we think short wand, it is...
It's not Harry Potter.
It's just longer. Very likely he's not being inconsistent here with his, what do you call it? Legendarium. Or it's not that he hasn't figured out that oh no, Gandalf has a staff, not a wand. It's just, it is the same thing for him, I think, in this.
Again, that's what we talked about earlier. Tolkien's writing, even though he's writing ostensibly to children when he first did it, he, as a philologist, lives in this moment where words have changes in connotation and he chooses how they're used very often.
Yeah.
His synonyms are not the same synonyms that we would use today. Nice rings, buddy.
I'm trying. I'm getting there. Well, this is where they get out their pipes and they blow smoke rings. I've been practicing.
You're getting it.
They're getting a little. Some of them come out okay. Some of them don't.
Once you can make a gray ship that sails off to the Gray Haven or
Yeah,
from the
that's
Gray
later.
Havens.
That's a later lesson.
Yeah.
So I'm still trying to learn how to turn them different colors. So well, Bilbo lies down to go to sleep and he has nasty dreams. It says he had very nasty dreams. He dreamed there was a crack in the wall at the back of the cave. It got bigger and bigger, and then he dreams he's falling. Well, there was a crack opening. It wasn't really a dream. He was kind of awake. He was noticing this happening. And out jumped the goblins, big goblins, great ugly looking goblins, lots of goblins. And they come pouring out um, uh, to seize everybody. This is where I'm reminded of George MacDonald, fantasy writer in the 19th century that Tolkien read and was very, influenced by. He has a series a couple of his books at least have goblins in them. And The Princess and the Goblins is the one I'm most familiar with. There's also a sequel to it. And Tolkien acknowledged the inspiration that he got from MacDonald's Goblins and how he's kind of they did inspire him. They're not exactly the same, but they have a lot of similarity. Goblins in MacDonald's work live in mines. In Princess and the Goblin, they live in these mines in this kingdom. They capture a boy named Curdy, and then the Princess Irene has to go and rescue him. And then Curdy later rescues Irene from the goblins, and it's fun stuff. I've read it to my girls. There's really you can find nice old editions with nice old illustrations all through it. The goblins drawn in here don't look anything like any Tolkien goblin. They're very hairy.
Yeah.
And they but MacDonald was a minister as well, a clergyman, as people, lettered people frequently were in the 19th century. He was also a friend of Lewis Carroll. He was a close friend of Lewis Carroll, and was one of the people that tried to that helped convince Carroll that he needed to publish his Alice stories, that his Alice stories were worth publishing, and that he should do it. MacDonald tries to fuse this kind of pagan folklore with his Christian beliefs in his works. And it kind of works, I think. I know there's some people that don't like some of the later books that maybe they get a little too heavy on he's trying to preach to us, but I don't find that in his fantastical children's stories. I think that he does wind up giving us this world that's interesting. It's still very Victorian. It's a very Victorian mindset. So not like, any kind of, empowering fantasy from closer to today. It's still very Victorian, but they're enjoyable, and I would recommend.
Ed, this might sound a little bit more like we're talking about illustration again, but we're really not. The fact is that while there was much written about fairies and elves and gnomes and all of that stuff that might give us descriptions, there aren't a lot of good descriptors for goblins and trolls.
Yeah.
Right? They're left to the imagination quite a bit. Whether they're hairy for some people, whether they're, monstrously tall. Somebody put it in the chat earlier that there's all kinds of orcs and goblins. And that's true because they're all somewhat intended to be tainted creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And so like a bunch of, like today we would think about it like mutants, like there's just not, there's not a singular pattern to how they look. But that's because different writers have written about them in different ways, but never given us, they make them monstrous without giving us a lot of written description. We don't have a lot of written description about Grendel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, we get a lot of written description about, the heroic forms, but not the villainous forms, other than dragons. We get a lot of written descriptions about dragons.
All we get is that they're rough, they're ugly, you don't get specific things about them here.
We don't know. I mean, you know, Jackson's orcs are one way in the films, and then
Mhm.
he tries to do a more expansive version of them when he gets to the Hobbit movies by
Okay.
doing great ones that are CGI, tiny ones that are CGI, and like sort of expand on that. But we just don't know. It's not within the fiction of the time.
Well, they go in and they seize everybody except Gandalf. Um, not Gandalf. He had woken up just in time, and when the goblins came to grab him, there was a terrible flash like lightning in the cave, a smell like gunpowder, and several of them fell dead. Um, I like that with the smell of gunpowder, there's the idea here that it's just some kind of weapon technology. Maybe not said like he just like it's like a bomb that he could
Yeah,
set off.
yeah.
That he has these things that he could set off, and uh, and he escapes. So, but they're all taken, and the goblins knew their way as well as you to the nearest post office. You get that narrator coming in there as they're going
Yeah.
all these tangled passages in the mountain. They're rough. They pinch unmercifully. They chuckle and laugh in their horrible, stony voices, and then they sing a song, which is really a lot of fun. This kind of onomatopoetic song about the threats of violence that they're going to, subject the dwarves to, and they're so gleeful about it.
Yeah, I mean, you can do tremendous drill down in the study of poetry about this song and how very different it is from Tra-la-la-lally, right? You can definitely do the constrained meter of how the way the elves work, and then the building meter that happens here. The use of the exclamation point to not cause the notion of stresses, right?
Mhm.
That you would find in, other iams and tetrums, right? You're like, but, right?
Yeah.
And this sort of sing-songy quality that it has, like football hooligans would have, right?
Yeah.
At the time period. Like it's totally like that. But its meter actually really builds. I think that's really fascinating that it goes. I labeled it the other day because I knew we were going to do this. 4474, 4854. Like it just jumps all over the place. It doesn't contain meter. Um, but when it does, like in four, which is its recurrent syllabic count, right? It'll go swish smack with crack, right?
Hmm.
Causing cessation and an end to the notion of stress points.
Yeah.
You know, it's really great.
I
It's
love
really
that.
great for anybody who's interested in poetry to understand here. Tolkien knows a shit lot about poetry.
I wish we had a recording of him doing this one. We have him doing chip
Yeah.
plates that I posted on our Facebook group, but he didn't do this one. So I wonder quite like how he, had it going along in his own head. It almost sounds like a pirate song. Well, maybe that's the ho ho, my lad. I get there.
Well,
Um,
it's the same thing. It's the idea of that exclamation point breaking down the stress, no stress form of a lot of normal marching iams and pentams and things like that, right? The idea is when you have an exclamation point in a one syllable um, thing in poetry, you're almost causing a line break,
yeah.
you know? And it gives it, when you do it with recurring rhythm like that, you're giving it a kind of a sing-song manner, but it has a pace that it builds, you know?
I have to go back and listen to the other movie versions and the Rankin Bass and all those because I don't remember how they've gone. But for
The
these,
Rankin Bass one is good.
probably is these. But in the text here, the dwarves are. It says it sounded truly terrifying. And as they were shouting swish and smack, they were whipping them with their whips as they're moving along. And the goblins laugh and stamp and clap their hands. They're gleeful in their evil here. Um, and
Yeah,
then,
we should probably give some props to Corey Olson, who covers this really well for people who want to go deeper in his book on the Hobbit and even
yeah,
in his podcast. So if you really want to go there, go to Corey Olson.
they the goblins also the last and it's the last they ever saw of their little ponies because goblins eat horses and ponies and donkeys and much more dreadful things, and they are always hungry. This, but we don't get the fear that they're going to eat them, but maybe they will. It doesn't maybe it hints at that. I think it would say it because the troll certainly said it. And it's not like a revelation here that they could get eaten. By another creature. But they also don't make beautiful things. I love this. They make no their goblins are cruel, wicked, and bad-hearted. They make no beautiful things, but they make many clever ones. Like weapons, hammers, axes, swords, daggers, pickaxes, tongs, weapons and tools, but also instruments of torture. And then he says, not unlikely that they invented some of the machines that have since troubled the world, especially the ingenious devices for killing large numbers of people at once, for wheels and engines and explosions always delighted them.
And much of this was in the original version. This is
Yeah,
not an amendment to make it more in line with Lord of the Rings.
yeah,
He was already positioning goblins in his mind as being the warlike quality
yeah,
of the outer world that he hated. You know, the nature destroying
yeah,
and warlike quality of invention.
yeah. And there's definitely the resonance there to to war and the mechanistic war that Tolkien had gone through where but it's the history of war, finding ways to make machines to make greater weapons of mass destruction, goes back to gunpowder, or the uses of gunpowder, and the goblins are all kind of part of that. But they're not just part of it. They take it's an enjoyable thing that they do.
Oh yeah,
They take delight in this.
yeah. The song is it's clear on that, as is like the things that they do make are instruments of torture.
We now see the great goblin on his great flat stone, large flat stone, sat a tremendous goblin with a huge head. He's the great goblin, and he challenges them, and Thorin he knows who he is. Thorin Oakenshield, I know too much about your folk already. So there's definitely a history here that we know, that we've heard of dwarves and goblins and their wars, and this is, or is this where we find all about it? Or was it mentioned before? I can't remember. Um, for,
Well, it's curious, right? That like I sort of set this up when I said there might be 6 people in the world of Middle Earth at this time, and even they have to use runes to understand swords of Gondolin. But these guys just kind of recognize them
right
from
off the
on
bat.
sight and from myth,
Yep.
you know?
Oh, it's like
Which
when you see Excalibur, it's like,
exactly.
oh, that's Excalibur if you're
I
in
don't
that universe.
I don't think it's unbelievable. I think what it does is say, oh shit, what are you doing with that thing? Right? Because it's so
Well, it
legendary.
gets them in trouble too, because Thorin's trying to explain his way out of it. Not that he's going to anyway, but it's the thing that they recognize that
Yeah.
That's it. You've got Orcrist Goblin Cleaver. They call it Biter,
Yeah.
the sword that he has.
Biter and beater.
They have
Yeah.
their own name for it, Biter. And that's it. They're done for. The dwarves are going to be all killed. They're tortured and killed, and Bilbo too. And we get no warning this time, like we did with the trolls, where we even before the trolls, started arguing, we said, but just this moment, Gandalf showed up. And then we get the scene. This time you get no warning. This is just at that moment, all the lights in the cavern went out. The fire goes out and then there's an explosion and then they're all and I love the again the onomatopoeia going on here with the sounds, the yells and yammering, croaking, gibbering and jabbering, howls, growls and curses, shrieking and skriking, the all the sounds that they would make going through all this as they're being burned. It sounded like several hundred wild cats and wolves being roasted slowly alive, but it's also the sparks were burning holes in the goblins. This is,
Yeah.
they're kind of firebombed here.
Children's book, everybody. Children's book.
But they're so mean and bad.
Yeah.
And they and then Bilbo sees suddenly a sword flashed in its own light, and Bilbo saw it go right through the great goblin as he stood dumbfounded in the middle of his rage. So just a sword comes out of nowhere and kills him, and then they hear, "Follow me quick," a voice fierce and quiet, and Dory grabs Bilbo and puts him on his shoulders, and then Gandalf lit up his wand. Again, it's his wand again. I think you can assume it's a staff. Of course, it was Gandalf. As if you didn't realize that that's who it was. I can't imagine people wouldn't have guessed that that's Gandalf at that point.
I
But
have the weirdest question from the chat from our friend David, who asks, "Does the Great Goblin have small hands?"
and we're not going to get into that. But but he's been killed here, and he is and then they all have to flee, and Gandalf's leading them through. And then and then we get this moment here where he takes out his sword, and his sword now, Glamdring, which is the one he's used to kill the Great Goblin with, and it burns. It flashed in the dark by itself. It burned with a rage that made it gleam if goblins were about. Now it was bright as blue flame for delight in the killing of the great lord of the cave. So we get this tiny little bit of info. If goblins are about, the sword glows.
Yeah.
It's Glamdring, the foe hammer. The goblins called it Beater, so it's Biter and Beater. And then we find out that Gandalf had grabbed Orcrist, had rescued it from them to give to Thorin. So they have both of their swords now. And now it's just fleeing. Oh no, actually, I love this little bit, Rob. Well, this is Gandalf. Well, it might be worse. And then again, it might be a good deal better. No ponies and no food, no knowing quite where we are, and hordes of angry goblins just behind. On we go.
On we go.
Gandalf's assessment of their situation right here. They take turns carrying Bilbo on their backs, which is really nice, although it's annoying for Bombor. Bilbo, not for the last time, why did I ever leave my hobbit hole? But Bombor's like, why did we ever bring a little hobbit on this treasure hunt? And goblins come after them, but Gandalf and Thorin are there with the swords and they run away. So they're, able to start to get away, but the goblins get smart and realize, we need to sneak up on them. So they put out their torches and they sneak up on them in the dark in the cave. And that is why neither Bilbo nor the dwarves nor even Gandalf heard them coming, nor did they see them. And then they trip up Dory in the back with Bilbo on his back. And he shouted and fell, and the hobbit rolled off his shoulders into the blackness, bumped his head on hard rock, and remembered nothing more. Dum dum dum. There's a cliffhanger right there. So a moment of
Keep in
danger.
mind the number of times that Bilbo gets a conk on the head and then wakes up in a different situation.
Or
It's
Bilbo.
a numerous way of keeping it a kid's book later. So,
Well, we get the cliffhanger here, and we'll find out next week before we get to the Thane's book here. Next week, I have to mention this now, we move on to chapter 5, Riddles in the Dark. And this is probably the most famous of all Tolkien chapters, you know. But when it was published in 1937, it was quite different in the first couple editions from what it is likely in the book you are reading now. Unless you have one of these facsimile editions that I have, or you're reading, or you have a first edition or second edition. Um, Tolkien heavily revised Riddles in the Dark to make it line up with The Lord of the Rings, and which is all I'll say about it. But you can read it. I took pictures of, first I took pictures of the copy we have at the Rosenbach, and they didn't turn out as nice. So at home here, I took pictures in my facsimile edition of the chapter, and I made a PDF of it, and I posted it on our webpage, on the
good.
Biblioventures webpage, Biblioventures Hobbit webpage at the rosenbach.org. So you can read that chapter along with the other the updated chapter. There's also a link on the web page that somebody has put together a website where they have a side-by-side comparison of the two chapters. So next week we will not be able to get away from spoilers about Lord of the Rings. We won't have to worry about spoilers for the rest of the Hobbit, but it's all about those differences in those two chapters, and it'll be really fascinating to see the kind of changes he made to it. So that's what we're going to hit next week, and you'll have, so it's double read. So it's, you have to read the same chapter twice, but two different versions of the chapter, and it's great that we can do that and that they exist. Let's get to the Thane's book, Rob.
So much that you could always do with the Things book.
I was going to ask you, or did I say this earlier? Because this is the note that I took earlier. That does this seem like a prequel to you because of how you've done this? Because you so know the Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion so well, and then does it feel like a prequel in reading it?
So I talked about Quest for Erebor live here tonight, and I hope people will pursue it that are not first-time readers. Like you said, they should be experienced Hobbit and Lord of the Rings readers. There's another thing that happened in 1960 where Tolkien endeavored to rewrite The Hobbit as a pure prequel, which meant taking out numerous things that felt like they were part of this informed goblins know their way through their tunnels as well as you know your way to a post office.
Mm-hmm.
Like all these anachronisms, also things like the troll purse and all these other things that'll happen later in the book that I'm going to allude to. He made it less with the whimsy of a children's book
Mm-hmm.
and more within the language
Mm-hmm.
that he wrote The Lord of the Rings in. And somebody said, yeah, that's kind of great, but it's not The Hobbit.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what I love about The Hobbit.
Yeah.
I guess what I would like to approach within the Thane's book is this notion for informed readers that there is this thing, and it's part of the frame narrative, there's this thing called the Red Book of Westmark, which is supposed to contain the story of Bilbo's There and Back Again, plus the early parts of The Lord of the Rings, and then amended by Frodo and Sam, and then overwritten, by other people in different versions in other places.
And then the Thane's book contains all of that, plus some also of Bilbo's translations from the elves.
Exactly.
So
That's what the Thane's book definition
was
is.
Contained the most of any one book.
There seems to be, and it's distinctly mentioned in The Lord of the Rings, there seems to be an unwillingness by Frodo and Sam and anybody else who came after to rewrite what Bilbo had already written, right? So The Hobbit isn't really a prequel. In my mind, The Hobbit is the story as Bilbo told it to Sam and Frodo and Merry and Pippin and all these youngsters who wanted to hear stories of the outer world, rendered in the way that it is. And it needs to stand that way. And it stands that way in the Red Book, even though we have parts within the Council of Elrond where he reframes all of this. It stands alone in the way that it should be, because they don't want to take away from the childhood fable that they learned. It needs to be there in order to make everything they did.
Well,
exist.
I agree with you in that, yes, that's what we want it to be. But I think there's a question in my mind. Once you know this stuff really well, when you read it, it becomes a prequel in that you can't help but see all the things that are leading to something else in the future. That, which is kind of what a definition of a prequel is. When a prequel in itself means that you are aware of what comes after it, even though you're watching an earlier story of it. And so it's hard. Like, I can't get that stuff out of my head clearly, but
Yes and no. I mean, we've been talking about narrative positioning and all that sort of stuff. If I accept that this was written this way by Bilbo as he told it to children, then I don't care if the elves come off sounding differently than the elves sound by the time Frodo and Sam write about going to the Council of Elrond and their impressions of Elrond. If I accept different authors as part of the whole book, problem with prequels is we try to link them into the same authorial vision. And they don't have to be.
Oh yeah, I agree. It doesn't have to be at all. It is a standalone book. But
we've had conversations about fan fiction and adaptation, and like, there's somebody, if somebody wants to do a really good Star Trek series that's in cartoon form and fun, like Below Decks, I'm all about it, because they clearly know they know what they're talking about, and they're having fun talking about it, right? It doesn't mean that they're making it silly, but other people might feel that way.
Yeah. Let's get to a couple things in this that have some greater resonance that, people, would see. First of all, Rivendell itself, Imladris, as this place is, becomes much more important in the later legendarium, because it becomes more important in Tolkien writing about this world. But it's also, especially with that last homely house, it's very tied with his what is it, the Book of Lost Play, the Cottage of Last Play, that his very first attempt before The Hobbit to create this world, there is this house that someone visits and encounters where they hear these stories.
Yes.
And
Cottage of Lost Play.
Cottage of Lost Play
is the first framing device that Tolkien employed
which has echoes with Rivendell being the last homely house and this place you go and hear stories, and it still exists, and it's got this long history. And
it
same
was
thing.
It was in Tol Eressëa that
I know it's not the same thing, but it's the idea is still there. It kind of has this resonance when he's then starting to tell this story for his kids. It does connect in some way to the ideas of this other greater world that he's creating, even though he's not going to try to match them up.
And directly, I mean, in Lord of the Rings, when we do visit, Rivendell, there is the storytelling place of the Great Fire that they go and sit around and tell these stories in. And that's a direct drop to the Cottage of Lost Play, Because there's this fire in the hearth all the time, and that's where people go and sing songs. And,
Yeah.
you know,
You can
Bilbo
find the
does his
book of the
Rivendell.
the first two volumes of the History of the Middle Earth series are the Book of Lost Tales 1, the Book of Lost Tales 2, and then you can find all this kind of information in those. Elrond, according to Tolkien, was a kind of happy accident that he names him Elrond in this book, because that's already a character that he has as this half-elven figure, and that Tolkien kind of hints that he wasn't really thinking about it as the same person, but since he only has so many names to use at the time, that it
He
winds up being that person.
used names and then found reasons to connect those names.
Yeah,
We'll see that more with, with Thorin's grandfather. But he likes certain names,
yeah,
and then later he kind of goes, "Oh, maybe that's a grandson," or I don't know, maybe he got reincarnated. Let's talk about that.
yeah,
And it's important to it's really Tolkien's. When we first encounter Tolkien, we think about, my God, how dense the world is. But we also have to understand that he was a very reflexive author who, when he sold a book and people wanted that, he also tried to turn the other things that he did. Like, he's the king of retcon to some
yeah.
degree.
Yeah, I mean it's not exactly retcon, but it is in the sense that he's later realizes that it's reverse retconning, isn't it? That he realizes that he had things early on that he that that he can now use later and kind of make it
No,
can
I guess I would call it metatextual retcon.
yeah,
So when he says in The Lord of the Rings that I told the story to my friends this way, meaning in the Hobbit, you know, um, but here's what really kind of happened,
yeah.
and he apologizes for it in
We'll
Lord of
get
the
into all that
Rings.
next week.
He's
Yeah.
already gone back to the second version here and tried to make it more applicable to Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings. But he's actually really very, in a metatextual way, saying, some of you may have already heard the story differently, and I'm apologizing to you for lying. That's super. Like when we talked about, kind of Joyce and Tolkien at the beginning of this session, that is a really super modern concept about
Yeah.
metatextuality.
Uh-huh.
You know,
We're really going
and
to get into that next week. There'll be a whole there's because it's related to next week's chapter, and we're
absolutely,
going to talk
yeah.
about it there. Elrond, we get a lot of. I mean, he says a lot about him. Um, he mentions the beginning of history, the wars of evil goblins and the elves and the first men in the north. This Elrond is there for all of that. All of this is, you read the Silmarillion, and you get a chunk of this in that. And other stories.
Moreover, he wasn't just saying read the Silmarillion.
Well,
He
yeah,
was saying to Alan and Unwin, publish the Silmarillion.
yes, that he definitely wants. Yes. I'm saying read the Silmarillion for people if you want to
Yeah.
get, the kind of what's going on here. Um, but yes, and it also does very much hint to the fact that he then wanted to publish all of this Silmarillion stuff, all this first age, second age stories about the elves that he's created, the high elves he's created. He originally called them gnomes, and then he changed that. But the high elves of the West is mentioned in this chapter, and the high elves of the West are the elves that traveled to Valinor. Not all of them traveled over the sea to the land, kind of like the land of the gods in a sense, the Valinor. Um, but some of them did, and then they returned,
Mm-hmm.
and then had to fight these wars against Morgoth, and this. It's so rich, and it's just fascinating to see tiny little hints of it in this book that are still there, that he has worked out some of this on his own already, and some of this he won't work out until years to come, but it's
So I think you and Graham, or you and Sarah, have talked a bit about this concept of textual ruins. right?
That
Um,
Michael Drought concept of textual ruins. Yeah.
yeah, and textual ruins gets a lot of play here and there. Um,
Well, frequently these aren't even textual ruins
they're
because
not.
even things that he's come up with yet.
Yeah, they're not. What they are often is allusions to things that he's thinking about that he would like to
Yeah.
impart into the rest of the world, but they broaden the scope of the world,
Yeah.
right? Gondolin? Do you ever get the word gondolin or the the high elves from
Yeah.
across the sea ever again in this book?
Yeah.
But he's already been writing about them.
Yeah.
He's already got a construction in his head. And so when he begins this story for his kids, and then when he turns around and he needs somebody to explain the importance of these blades, and more importantly, for the thrust of the story, the Moonletters, he needs an informed character to do that. So he borrows from his own legendarium, and he gives us Elrond, and he says this and this and this, and he drops in this thing about Gondolin, which is one of the first stories he wrote.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that nobody else would know about, nobody else would care about,
Yeah.
and this just broadens the world in a way because we don't get to find out about Gondolin in the story. We just as readers get
Nobody
to
finds
think that the
out.
world is big.
Nobody finds out until the Silmarillion is published.
Yeah,
1977, after
and
Tolkien is dead.
even beyond that, once Lord of the Rings comes out, and after even The Hobbit,
Yeah.
he starts receiving letters from fandom. So we could do a whole other show about the engagement of fandom
Yeah.
Tolkien brought on that no other writer prior to his time had ever done.
He even mentions Gondolin and the Goblin Wars here, and the dragons and goblins who destroyed the city. And so, what I like there in this, for the first time readers of it, you get the sense that, oh, it's not, there's not just a dragon
Oh
that
yeah,
took the dwarves' treasure. There were other dragons in the past, and the elves have fought dragons too. So they're an ongoing problem, dragons.
yeah.
But they, that's gone on. And also the whole idea of the Goblin Wars, the wars of, Beleriand, War of the Great Jewels, you call it, that happens in the Second Age that, then in a part of the world that doesn't even exist, a part of Middle Earth doesn't even exist now in the Third Age where this story is set. Because it's
And
all,
we'll get it with the wood elves and
yeah.
the stolen necklaces and
Yeah,
jewels.
when we get there, we'll see a different conception of elves, which is interesting. So we've seen how these elves behave in Rivendell. We're going to see how elves in the woods, the wood elves, and they behave, and they're like it's like a different species almost the way they behave. They're
It's also interesting for people who are real LOTR fans that who think that Elrond and I'm going to say it, the gnomish elves, right? The
Mhm.
deep elves that have seen the light of the West, like Elrond, even though he hasn't gone, but his kindred have, right? Um, or Galadriel, or people like that, right? They're very different than the Ronduil and the Wood Elves,
Mhm.
who've never gone. They never saw the light of the West. And he starts to play with that right away, you know?
Yep. Somebody's asking in the chat here just about textual ruins, and we keep mentioning it. And it's by Michael.
Yeah, we need to do
Michael
that.
Drought comes up with this term, Drout. I mean, his new book, Tower and the Ruin, is great about Tolkien. But there's a great lecture you can find on YouTube where he talks about this idea of textual ruins, and it's really how they operate in Lord of the Rings. Those books there. But if you search up textual ruins and Michael Drought, you'll find information about this, and you can find that lecture. Um, One other little thing I want to mention, it's just a little thing, is that I love that when Bilbo, it says, well, he would have stopped forever and ever there if he could have. And of course, if you know Lord of the Rings, it's like, yeah, it is. That's his retirement home.
That's where he goes. Yeah.
He does get to return
He
there.
starts out by telling Gandalf that he wants to see mountains, mountains, Gandalf. But he doesn't go that far. He's old. He, having given up the ring, He follows the dwarves that are with him, the unnamed dwarves that are with him, after the long expected party. And he just eventually winds up there. And it has a really, like, by the time he catches up with Frodo, like 17 years have gone by. And he's had a really rich life just sitting by the fire, translating old tales from elves into poetry.
At his Rivendell is Bilbo's retirement home. So
that's great,
of course, because he can do anything he wants there. Whatever he likes best, that's what he gets to do there.
But I think it's important that he doesn't.
Bilbo's not working.
It's important that he doesn't come to feasts, right? When we see that, he doesn't come to the feast when Frodo arrives.
Yeah,
he's sitting in the Hall of Fire. He stays there most of the time.
Yeah.
Bilbo, it's interesting for people who go into the Lord of the Rings from this, how much Bilbo will become a stand-in for Tolkien. He will be a narrative moment that he will, like, he'll talk about stuff like the confession, about how he may have told the story about the ring differently, finding the ring differently. The fact that he just wants to sit by the fire while other things are going on. And he wants to inform, his surrogate son, Frodo, as he's writing letters to his sons, John and Christopher, and the war, about his further adventures. In a lot of ways, Bilbo shifts from who he is in this novel in the later story, which is bigger than a novel, to being a kind of a stand-in for Tolkien as an older man trying to explain things to friends and family. And I think it's a really core thing to understand about Tolkien's approach to story.
All righty. It's a good spot to leave it.
Okay.
Well, elf friends, thank you for joining us for episode 3 of Biblioventures the Hobbit. Rob, thank you. You will come back in a few weeks.
Yeah, and I'll be on the chat next week for, because I like to.
Awesome. That's fun.
Is it Graham or Sarah next week? Do we know yet?
Graham is next week. Next week for episode 4, we will cover the most famous chapter in the book, chapter 5, Riddles in the Dark, in which Bilbo engages in a riddle contest with a very curious creature. If you haven't read it yet, you'll see. Graham Cheadle will return as our co-host. Thank you to all of you who have made a donation to the Rosaback or become a member. We couldn't do these shows without your generous support. Your donation helps us create more programs like this and also care for our collections. You could also become a member. Membership gives you early access and discounts to programs and courses. You can find out more at our website, rosenbach.org. Thank you all. Thank you,
Actually,
Rob.
Ed, I'm going to add one addendum, and that's that apparently Ed would add 5 more people to Ulysses if you really want to hear me talk about.
We'll see. We'll see if we're adding 5 more people. Yeah, maybe. We'll see.
Ask him. See ya.
Okay. All righty. Thank you all for watching these episodes, and spread the word. More people can still watch us, and I would love that. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library, and if you're going to smell like elves. Good night, everybody.
Ed, are we still on?